Would you be surprised if I told you that some sponges alive today were already old when the mammoths were still around? Today, you better be ready because I'm bringing you everything from Immortal Urchins to Termite Queens. Oh, and they're called queens for a reason. Forget old. Today, we're looking at legendary. But before we get into the record books, hit that like, subscribe, and now, let's do this. I'm Mike with List 25, and these, in no particular order, are 25 animals that live longer than you ever knew. 25. Glass sponges. When it comes to long lives, nothing on land even comes close to what's hiding at the bottom of the sea. Some of the animals there are so old they make the pyramids look new. Among them, glass sponges, those strange skeleton-like creatures made of silica, are the reigning champions. One specimen was estimated to be around 11,000 years old. 11,000. That means it was alive before writing existed. They pull it off by living their lives in extreme slow motion. They're usually anchored to the seafloor in icy, nutrient-poor waters where they barely move, barely eat, and grow at a crawl. And because the experts can read their skeletons like tree rings, we know that some of them have been there since long before we figured out civilization. 24. Greenland Sharks. I'm covering the Greenland shark next purely because I know you want to see it, and because we've only recently realized just how old they get. Scientists have done radiocarbon dating on their eye lens proteins, the kind formed in the womb and never replaced, and discovered that these Arctic giants can live for centuries. In fact, the oldest one they tested was thought to be between 400 and 500 years old. That's simply astonishing. These sharks grow unbelievably slow, less than a centimeter a year, and do not reach sexual maturity until they're about 156. I mean, imagine surviving to reproduce only after you've lived a century and a half. The cold slows everything down, and that low metabolism seems to keep their bodies from breaking down the way ours do. 23. Termite Queens. First, let's shrink things down, because one of the most impressive survivors on this list is an insect. The termite queen can live up to 50 years. That's insane compared to the workers around her who barely make it 1 or 2. She doesn't just sit around idly either. The queen and king actually mate daily, and she lays 30,000 eggs every single day. By the end of her life, that adds up to around 165 million eggs. And fun fact, in the African savanna, the combined weight of termites outweighs all the buffalo, giraffes, and antelope put together. Her output doesn't just fuel a colony, it supports entire ecosystems. And when her time is finally up, the workers lick her to death, then raise a new queen from a nymph fed with their very own royal jelly-like concoction. 22. Saltwater Crocodiles. The saltwater crocodile, or salty as my Australian friends would say, can live up to 70 years in the wild, and can get closer to 100 if they avoid humans altogether. What a sad reality, right? Anyway, unlike most animals, crocs never really stop growing. They slow down a lot after adulthood, but they'll keep adding size for as long as they live. On top of that, their bodies show signs of serious staying power. Studies have shown that crocodiles have strong immune defenses and the kind of cellular repair systems that keep diseases at bay. Their blood even contains antimicrobial properties that researchers are studying for medical use. So an old croc might lose some of its teeth or develop cataracts, but it can still hunt and breed long past the age most animals are slowing down. 21. Great white sharks. Let's stick with animals with scary teeth for a second. Did you know some great whites make it into their 70s? We always thought they made it to their 30s at best. Then someone decided to do some testing on their vertebrae. And suddenly, we had one male in the Atlantic confirmed to be over 70 years old, and a female still swimming strong in her 60s, which gives them one of the longest lifespans of any predator in the ocean. They take decades just to reach maturity, often not breeding until they're 25 to 30 years old, meaning they don't replace themselves quickly. And when you combine that with their slow growth and all the ways we're taking them out of the equation, it makes them especially vulnerable to overfishing and other environmental threats. 20. Black corals. Black corals don't get to live with the flashy colors of shallower reefs, but they make up for it with serious staying power. Some colonies off Hawaii have been dated over 4,000 years old, and they're still growing today. A black coral grows gradually and might add only a few millimeters in a year, but over centuries, they can end up as massive structures. Individual polyps do die off, but since the colony just keeps replacing them, the organism itself can last for millennia. In a sense, they're like the record keepers of the ocean, since other animals make these corals their home, giving scientists chemical clues that can help them understand what the ocean used to be like. 19. Lobsters. Lobsters have a reputation for being immortal, but I'm here to burst that bubble. It's not true. However, they do have one of the strangest strategies for extending their lives in the animal kingdom. Their secret is buried in their cells. Most animals, including us, eventually run out of the ability to repair DNA as we age. Lobsters keep producing an enzyme called telomerase for their whole lives. That enzyme keeps their chromosomes patched up, and it's a big reason they can keep growing, molting, and reproducing even when they're decades old. They easily grow to about 50, and if you look at some of the photos they took in the past, some of those giants they pulled from the Atlantic might have been closer to 100. Of course, they're not unstoppable. They eventually succumb to disease, predators, or the sheer energy cost of molting a huge shell, and most scuba divers today will tell you they don't spot nearly as many as they used to. 18. African elephants. 60 to 70 years old doesn't sound like much, but African elephants grow into that long run at a crawl. Females don't usually have their first calves until their early teens, and pregnancies last nearly 2 years, the longest of any mammal. That means a single mother might raise just a handful of calves, so every year counts. It's also a fact that the older matriarchs guide the herd, relying on decades of memory to lead them to food and water. But what makes elephants truly astonishing is how they express their grief. After the conservationist Lawrence Anthony, also known as the Elephant Whisperer, passed away, the herd he helped rescue walked 12 hours through the night to stand by his home, where they mourned him for 2 days. Elephants have also been seen circling bodies, or even trying to cover them with earth or branches. Researchers are still trying to understand it, but there's definitely more to these animals than most people give them credit for. 17. Red sea urchins. For something that looks like a pincushion, the red sea urchin has an absurdly long life. Scientists at Oregon State found that these invertebrates, scattered along the Pacific coast from Alaska down to Baja, can live over 100 years, and in some cases, past 200. Some of the largest specimens we've come across have actually been dated to the early 1800s. The weirdest part is that they don't really seem to age. Their cells don't seem to lose repairability with time, and their reproductive output doesn't taper off either. The only thing that seems to change is their growth rate. When they're young, they double in size fast, but by the time they're adults, their growth slows to a crawl, literally only a few millimeters a year. 16. The Tuatara. The slowest reptile left from the age of dinosaurs is also the one with the fastest sperm. Yep, I could almost stop this entry right here, but I will elaborate. The Tuatara is New Zealand's living fossil. It can take 35 years to reach full size and sometimes needs 16 months just to hatch. Yet, when it comes to reproduction, their sperm swim 4 times faster than other reptiles. And trust me, you want to know why. The male doesn't have a penis, so speed in this case is the only strategy. The species itself is in a tough spot though. Warmer temperatures produce more males, and since we're experiencing higher temperatures all over the world, researchers have started to collect and freeze their sperm, just in case nature needs a backup plan. 15. Brandt's bat. Myotis bats are tiny. Some weigh just a few grams, yet dozens of them have been recorded living past 20 years. We've even found one over 41. That's like a human making it to 250. Researchers are incredibly interested in them because of their DNA. You see, normally as cells divide, the protective caps on the ends of chromosomes, called telomeres, become shorter. Shorter telomeres are linked with aging and higher mortality. But when scientists sampled hundreds of wild Myotis bats, they found their telomeres didn't shorten at all, so their cells can keep repairing damage much longer than ours can. They can obviously still die from things like starvation, dehydration, or accidents, but they rarely develop the kind of cancers or other classic age-related diseases we'd expect to see in other mammals. 14. Hydra. Hydra are tiny freshwater animals, usually less than an inch long, and just like the red urchins, they simply don't seem to age. Every 3 to 4 weeks, they replenish themselves with brand new stem cells. That constant renewal means their bodies don't wear down and they just don't age at all. In fact, in the long-term studies where we kept them fed and in clean water, their death rate stayed flat and fertility never dropped. They're also masters of regeneration. Cut off a head and it grows back, just like their MCU counterpart. You get it now? Slice one into pieces and each piece can become a whole new animal. 13. Whale sharks. For all their size, the scientific community didn't know how to measure whale sharks' age until very recently. Fish usually have ear bones with growth rings, but sharks don't, so researchers got creative and turned to nuclear history. In the 50s and 60s, our nuclear bomb tests caused a global spike of carbon-14 that ended up inside living tissue. By testing the vertebrate from stranded whale sharks, the researchers matched those chemical timestamps and could date it to specific decades. One massive female, close to 33 feet long, turned out to be almost 50 years old. If they compared that female with others in photographs, it isn't a stretch to say that they can live easily to 120. Either way, we're talking about a fish that can outlive all of us, all while traveling around with a mouth wide enough to swallow you whole. But thankfully, they stick to plankton. 12. Lake sturgeon. The lake sturgeon looks like something that swam straight out of prehistory. And in a way, they did. These fish first appeared in the fossil record about 136 million years ago, and have barely changed since. Instead of scales, their torpedo-shaped bodies are armed with bony plates, and their skeletons are made from cartilage instead of bone. Those whisker-like barbels also help them catch clams, snails, and pretty much anything they can slurp up. As for age, the record holder was a female that reached 154. Unfortunately, though, they take forever to reproduce. Males don't spawn until they're at least 8, and females can wait decades before laying their first eggs. Combine that with overfishing and dams that block migrations, and you can see why they've landed on the endangered list in most of their range. 11. Bowhead whales. If you want proof that whales can outlive just about anything, look no further than the bowhead. In 2007, hunters in Alaska pulled up one with a 19th century bomb lance still jammed in its side. That whale had been swimming around since the 1880s. Scientists later confirmed these Arctic giants can blow past 200 years, and some could even creep up to 268. Everything about them is oversized. The skull works like a battering ram to crack through sea ice. The mouth takes up nearly a third of the body, and the baleen plates can stretch around 13 feet, sweeping up entire clouds of crustaceans in a single go. They also have their own beefed-up DNA that carries tweaks to genes like ERCC1 and PCNA, both tied to damage control. Those mutations let their cells fix breaks and keep dividing without the usual wear and tear. 10. The olm. Olms are those weird, pale little amphibians that live in the caves of Slovenia and Croatia. It's not the kind of animal most of us ever think about, but let me just say this. In 2010, scientists tagged one, and it didn't move for 2,569 days. That's 7 years. Just sit with that for a second. The researchers couldn't believe the numbers either, but the truth is that olms are perfectly fine sitting in one spot. They're blind, so they sense incoming food through chemical signals in the water, and if nothing drifts past, they simply fast for years. They're also in no hurry to reproduce, only doing so once every decade or so. And some can live close to a century. When you only need to breed once a decade, there's really no point in burning calories. 9. The Laysan Albatross. Most Laysan albatrosses live past 50, but the most famous of them all, a female named Wisdom, is still laying eggs at more than 70 years old. She was banded in 1956, and she's still raising chicks on Midway Atoll today. Midway itself is like a giant neighborhood for them. Over 1 million live there. There are nests tucked into grass, pavement cracks, and even inside abandoned World War II gun turrets. They're also hopeless romantics. Before they settle down with one partner for life, they spend decades working on a kind of courtship dance. Once they've got it right, that pair bond can last for decades, which is how Wisdom has managed to outlive generations of her own chicks. 8. Ocean Quahog clams. This is Ming the clam, a bivalve that lived through 5 centuries before becoming front-page news. When scientists dredged it up off Iceland in 2006, it looked like just another sample for their aging study. They counted the growth rings on its shell, guessed about 405 years, and cracked it open for testing. Only later did they realize their mistake. Ming was actually 507 years old, making it the oldest individual animal we've ever recorded. This clam was alive during the Ming Dynasty in China, which is how it got its name. The backlash was instant, with researchers even getting accused of being clam murderers. It even led to the incident being called Clamgate, because why not? But to be fair, none of the specialists realized Ming's age before it was too late. Its longevity boils down to a very sedentary lifestyle. They bury themselves in sand, grow incredibly slowly, and don't burn a lot of energy. 7. Naked mole rats. This handsome little fella is a mole rat. Alright, I know, handsome might be pushing it. Wrinkly, hairless, with teeth that just jut out past his lips. He looks old the day he's born, and stays like that until he dies. One of them, nicknamed Joe, has been studied since the early 80s, and is still alive today, making him the oldest naked mole rat ever. If your math sucks, that makes him over 40. For a rodent, that's unheard of. Mice usually max out at 2 or 3 years, yet Joe and his kind just keep on trucking. Researchers are obsessed with these creatures because naked mole rats resist aging. Most animals, including us, double their risk of death as they age. Naked mole rats? That curve stays flat. They resist cancer, stay fertile for decades, and even their hearts and bones show no decline with time. 6. Tube worms. Tube worms don't bother with mouths, stomachs, or even moving around. Instead, they rely on bacteria living inside them to turn chemicals from seafloor vents, like hydrogen sulfide and methane, into food. Some of these worms can sit in one spot for centuries, while everything else ages and dies off. One study in the Gulf of Mexico followed them for more than 15 years and found their death rate was less than 1% a year. Now, I know not many of us really care for worms, but size and temperature usually predict lifespan, and tube worms throw that math out the window. Their secret is going all in on slow living, reproducing late, aging even later, and letting bacteria do all the hard work. 5. Rougheye Rockfish. This very plain-looking reddish fish hangs around the sea floor, but some of them are older than the United States. But not every species of rockfish makes it that far, and that's what got scientists curious. So they pulled in about 90 species, lined up the short-lived ones next to the elders, and went digging. What they found were repairs for broken DNA, immune changes to stop inflammation, and even extra control over insulin. All the stuff that catches up with us as we age, this fish simply patches. But nature always balances itself out. So for all those changes to their DNA, rough-eyes take decades to reach breeding age, and older females produce way more offspring than the younger ones, which means the future of the species literally depends on its elders. 4. The European Eel. Most European eels grow up in rivers, then make a one-way trip to the Sargasso Sea to spawn, and that's it. Game over in about 15 to 20 years. But if you cut them off from that journey, everything changes. In 1859, a little boy in Sweden dropped a young eel into his family's well to keep the water clean. That eel, nicknamed Ale, never got the chance to migrate, and according to local records, stayed there until it died in 2014. If true, it died at 155 years old. Experts are skeptical of the exact number, but we do have proof of another eel, Pute, who lived for 85 years in a Stockholm aquarium. When these eels live in isolation, they basically freeze in time. Without the signal to transform into breeding adults, their metabolism slows, stress stays low, and they can even survive long periods without food. 3. Freshwater pearl mussels. The freshwater pearl mussel can easily live to 100 while cleaning up the water around them. A single adult can filter up to 50 liters a day, pulling algae, bacteria, and gunk out of the river so fish, eels, and otters all get a better deal. Their life cycle is even stranger. Females release millions of larvae each summer, but the babies don't grow up on their own. Instead, they clamp onto the gills of salmon and trout and hitch a ride for months until they're ready to drop off into clean gravel. It takes more than a decade before they're mature enough to reproduce themselves, which means entire generations of mussels depend on pristine rivers and healthy salmon runs to survive. That dependence is sadly also why they're in real trouble today. 2. Periodical cicadas. They're not the first bug we've covered today, but they take a place of honor at number 2 on the list because they prove that sometimes the longest lives don't happen above ground at all. A cicada spends almost its whole life underground, feeding slowly on tree roots, basically stuck in an extended childhood that lasts 13 to 17 years, depending on the species. That's like a person staying in middle school until their 30s. Then, on schedule, they surface in the millions, leaving behind their shells and spend just a few weeks above ground before it's over. The adults don't eat much. They just breed and die. But the strategy is successful because their predators can't build up populations to match a food source that only arrives twice in a generation. 1. The Immortal Jellyfish. The Immortal Jellyfish can literally revert from its adult form back into a polyp, the stage it started from on the sea floor. So, if it's starving or injured, it doesn't die. It just resets and starts again. Hence the nickname. Several scientists have watched this happen more than once while researching the species, which means, in theory, the cycle could go on forever. But these jellyfish are tiny, less than 1/4 of an inch across, and there are plenty of fish and other sea creatures that are more than happy to eat them. Be that as it may, for all we know, a few of them have been hitting reset since the dawn of time, which is not only totally awesome, it's totally creepy. And that's a wrap. But don't go just yet. I've got a creepy little trivia question for you. What actually happens to a termite queen when her time is up? A. She gets walled off to die. B. She's carried outside and left to her own defenses. C. She gets licked to death and is replaced. Or D. She's paralyzed with venom and fed to the larvae. Post your answer right here in the comments below, and while you're at it, tell me what else should have made the list. Or if there's a countdown you'd like me to do next. And if today's list got you hooked, you'll love this one. 25 strange new species scientists recently discovered. It's got a giant snake, a bug straight out of Star Wars, and a predator that's basically a stuffed animal come to life. All brand new to science. That video will show up right here any second now. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.